Episode 1, The Birth of a Mask. In January 1989, a 32-year-old man walks toward the electric chair. Hundreds of people celebrate outside the prison with banners and fireworks. Inside, the condemned man smiles. He's handsome, polite, charismatic. He seems incapable of hurting a fly. But in reality, he's responsible for at least 30 brutal murders of young women. How did someone like that manage to go unnoticed for so long? What created Ted Bundy? The answer begins decades ago, in a small house in Philadelphia, with a family secret that would shape the fate of a young boy. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, November 24th, 1946. In a home for unwed mothers run by Volunteers of America, a 22-year-old woman named Eleanor Louise Cowell gives birth to a baby boy. The delivery is difficult and painful. The nuns who attend the place move with clinical efficiency, without affection. Eleanor is alone. There is no father present. There is no family. Only the silent judgment of an unforgiving society. The baby is initially registered as Theodore Robert Cowell, but on the birth certificate, in the father's line, another name appears, Lloyd Marshall, an Air Force salesman. Some will later claim this name is false, a fabrication to avoid stigma. Others will whisper that the real father could be Eleanor's own grandfather, Samuel Cowell, a violent man with an explosive temper. The truth will never be confirmed. Only the shadow of doubt will remain, the poison of a tainted origin. Eleanor is a young woman trapped in a ruthless era for single mothers. In the 1940s, having a child out of wedlock was considered a moral disgrace. Women like her were sent far away, hidden, and forced to give up their babies for adoption. But Eleanor doesn't want to give up her son. She decides to keep him, even if it means bearing the weight of social rejection. For the first 3 years of Theodore's life, mother and son live in Eleanor's parents' house in Philadelphia. Samuel Cowell is a patriarch, a racist, violent man who abuses animals and has uncontrollable outbursts of rage. He is said to keep a collection of pornographic magazines that little Theodore will discover years later. The grandmother, also named Eleanor, is a depressed woman who receives electroshock treatments for her mental instability. The atmosphere in that house is toxic, suffocating. Theodore grows up surrounded by secrets. He's told that Eleanor is his older sister, that his grandparents are his parents. It's a lie designed to protect him from the stigma, but in reality, it builds a foundation for a fractured identity. 1950. Theodore is 4 years old when Eleanor makes a life-changing decision to leave Philadelphia. Mother and son move to Tacoma, Washington, on the other side of the country. It's a new beginning, a chance to escape Samuel Cowell's stifling control. Eleanor seeks to reinvent herself, to build a life where no one knows her past. In Tacoma, Eleanor finds work and begins attending the local Methodist church. It's there that she meets Johnny Culpepper Bundy, a World War II veteran who works as a cook at the hospital. Johnny is a quiet, hard-working man with no great ambitions. He's neither rich nor particularly educated, but he's stable. And for Eleanor, that's enough. In May 1951, Eleanor and Johnny get married. Theodore, now almost 5 years old, is given a new last name, Bundy. Officially, he becomes Theodore Robert Bundy, although everyone at home calls him Ted. Johnny tries to be a good father to Ted. He takes him fishing, teaches him to play baseball, and includes him in family activities. But Ted never develops a real connection with him. Years later, he will say that Johnny was too clumsy, too simple. Ted, even as a child, feels superior. He feels he deserves more. The Bundy family grows rapidly. Eleanor and Johnny have 4 children together, and the small house in Tacoma fills with voices, toys, and childhood chaos. Ted, the eldest, begins to feel displaced. He is no longer the center of Eleanor's attention. He must now share her with siblings who bear the blood of Johnny Bundy, the man Ted secretly despises. Ted Bundy's childhood is on the surface ordinary. He attends public schools in Tacoma, earns decent grades, and causes no obvious problems. He is polite, clean, and quiet. His teachers describe him as shy but intelligent. His neighbors see him as a normal boy from a working-class family. But beneath that calm surface, something is wrong. Ted is extremely introverted. He doesn't make friends easily. On the playground, While other children play and laugh, Ted stands on the sidelines, watching. There's a disconnect, an inability to genuinely connect with his peers. He feels different, separate, as if he's seeing the world through glass. At home, Ted is a responsible older brother, the one who helps take care of the younger ones, the one who keeps his room tidy. But internally, he begins to develop troubling patterns. As a child, he shows an unusual interest in knives and guns. He collects violent images from magazines. At 3 years old, according to an aunt, he placed kitchen knives around the bed where she slept, a disturbing anecdote that years later would take on a sinister meaning. Ted also becomes a voyeur early on. He peers into the windows of neighboring houses, spying on families and women. There's something about observing without being seen that gives him a strange satisfaction. It's his first taste of control, of power over others without their knowledge. As he enters adolescence, Ted discovers something that will change his trajectory: violent pornography. At that time, this type of material wasn't as accessible as it would be decades later, but Ted actively seeks it out. He finds true crime magazines, pulp publications detailing violent murders, sexual assaults, and mutilations. He reads these stories with fascination. They don't repulse him, they excite him. 1969. Ted Bundy is 23 years old. He's a psychology student at the University of Washington, a handsome young man with political ambitions. Outwardly, his life seems to be heading toward success. But internally, Ted is in crisis. During a search of personal documents in a family home, Ted discovers his original birth certificate. There, in black ink, is the truth that has been hidden from him his entire life. Eleanor is not his sister. She's his mother. The grandparents he thought were his parents are actually his grandparents. Johnny Bundy is not his biological father. It's all been a lie. The revelation shatters him. Years later, in interviews, Ted downplays the impact of this discovery, saying it didn't really affect him. But those who know him notice a change. The mask of normalcy Ted has carefully constructed begins to crack. He feels betrayed, deceived, ashamed. If his own family lied to him about something as fundamental as his identity, what else in his life is fake? Who is he really? The question haunts him. Ted begins to construct a new identity, a fabricated one, designed to impress the world. If his origin is shameful, then he will create an exterior so shiny, so perfect, that no one will look underneath. 1967. Ted Bundy, now 21, is a freshman at the University of Washington. It is there that he meets the woman who will become his obsession. Stephanie Brooks, a sophisticated upperclassman with long, dark hair parted in the middle, graceful in every movement. For Ted, Stephanie is everything he isn't. She comes from a wealthy California family. She has natural confidence, social connections, and a secure future. Ted is immediately fascinated. It's not just physical attraction. It's admiration, envy, a desire to possess what she represents. Ted sets out to win her over with the intensity of someone on a mission. He presents himself as ambitious, intelligent, and charming. Stephanie, impressed by his attentiveness and apparent potential, agrees to go out with him. For a year, they become a couple. Ted takes her skiing, to dinner, and to college events. On the surface, they seem like the perfect couple. But Stephanie begins to notice cracks in Ted's facade. He has no real direction. He talks a lot about his ambitions, about becoming a lawyer, a politician, but takes no concrete steps. He's smart but lazy. He promises but doesn't deliver. And there's something else, something she can't quite put her finger on, but that bothers her, an emotional coldness, an inability on Ted's part to genuinely connect. In the summer of 1968, after graduation, Stephanie ends a relationship. She tells Ted he's immature, that he has no future, that she needs someone more ambitious. For Ted, this rejection is devastating. He doesn't just lose Stephanie. He loses a fantasy of becoming what she represents. Stephanie returns to California. Ted stays in Washington, humiliated, furious, broken. But instead of collapsing, something in him hardens. He promises himself that he'll win Stephanie back, that he'll prove her wrong, that he'll become the man she wanted. This obsession becomes the driving force for the next few years of his life. After Stephanie's rejection, Ted Bundy transforms. It's as if failure has given him clarity and purpose. He decides to completely reinvent himself. First, he changes his physical appearance. He lets his hair grow and combs it carefully. He starts dressing more elegantly, wearing turtleneck sweaters, iron pants, and polished shoes. He joins a gym and tones his body. He works on his body language, his way of speaking, and projecting confidence. Then he turns to his professional life. He gets involved in politics, volunteering for the Washington Republican Party. He attends events, makes connections, and proves himself helpful and trustworthy. In 1970, he works on a gubernatorial candidate's campaign. His performance is impressive enough to get noticed by important party figures. Ted also returns to college, this time with real focus. He enrolls in psychology courses, earns excellent grades, and impresses professors. He begins applying to law schools. He wants to become a lawyer, not just out of professional ambition, but because lawyers have power, respect, and status. And Ted wants all of that. During this period, Ted also develops another skill: social manipulation. He becomes adept at reading people, telling them what they want to hear, and making them feel special. He is charismatic, charming, and trustworthy. People describe him as the perfect guy, someone you can trust. But there's a dark side to this transformation. Ted isn't becoming a better person. He's perfecting a mask. He's learning to mimic emotions without actually feeling them. He's learning to manipulate without remorse. And somewhere deep within his psyche, something darker is growing. 1973. Ted Bundy, now 27, has achieved his transformation. He's a law student at the University of Utah, politically connected and impeccably handsome. And he decides it's time to contact Stephanie Brooks again. He calls her. He uses all his renewed charm, telling her about his accomplishments, about his new life. Stephanie, impressed by the change, agrees to see him again. Ted travels to California. He courts her with calculated intensity. He shows her that he's become exactly the man she wanted. Stephanie falls again. In her mind, Ted has finally matured, finally reached his potential. They resume their relationship. For weeks, Ted is the perfect boyfriend, attentive, romantic, present. They talk about the future, about marriage. Stephanie is in love. And then, without explanation, Ted disappears. He just stops answering calls. He doesn't respond to letters. He vanishes. Stephanie is confused, hurt, desperate for answers. She finally manages to reach him. She asks him what happened, why he left her. Ted's response is cold and calculated. "I just wanted to prove I could have you back." Then he hangs up. It's a perfectly executed revenge. Ted has regained power in the relationship. He's proven he can manipulate Stephanie's feelings at will. He's hurt her just as she hurt him. And in that moment of triumph, Ted feels something. Satisfaction, control, power over another person. It's intoxicating. And it won't be enough. The year 1974 begins seemingly normally for Ted Bundy. Outwardly, his life is in order. He's enrolled in law school at the University of Utah. He has a part-time job at a rape crisis center where, ironically, he counsels victims of sexual assault. He has a new girlfriend, Elizabeth Klopfer, a single mother who adores him and believes Ted is the love of her life. But something has changed in Ted. Revenge against Stephanie gave him a taste of something dark, something powerful. And that taste has turned into hunger. For years, Ted has fantasized about violence, about absolute control over another person. He has consumed violent pornography, imagined scenarios, refined his fantasies. But he has always held back, always kept those impulses in the realm of his imagination. Not anymore. In January 1974, in the darkness of a cold Seattle night, Ted Bundy commits his first known violent attack. He enters the apartment of a sleeping college student. He brutally beats her with a metal bar ripped from her bed frame. The attack is savage, sexual, and uncontrolled. The victim survives, but is left with permanent brain damage. She will never be able to identify her attacker. The police are baffled. There are no signs of robbery. No apparent motive. Just pure, gratuitous violence. Ted returns to his apartment that night. He showers and lies down next to Elizabeth, who sleeps obliviously. And in the darkness, Ted feels something he's never felt before. Absolute euphoria, a rush of adrenaline and power. He's crossed a line. He's transformed his fantasy into reality. And he knows, deep down, that he will do it again. A month after the attack, in February 1974, a 19-year-old student named Linda and Healy disappears from her Seattle apartment. Her bed is meticulously made, but stained with blood. Her night clothes are hung neatly in the closet. There are no signs of a struggle. Linda will never be seen alive again. It's the first of many. And while the police begin searching for answers, the perpetrator walks freely through the streets of Seattle, looking like any successful young man. Handsome, polite, and trustworthy. The mask is perfect. The monster is awake. And the United States still doesn't know it's facing one of the deadliest predators in its history. Episode 2. The hunt begins. Spring and summer of 1974. The Pacific Northwest, specifically Washington and Oregon, becomes hunting ground. Young college-age women begin disappearing with frightening regularity, one every few weeks. All between 18 and 25 years old. All with certain physical profile. Long, dark hair parted in the middle, attractive, slim, white. The pattern is consistent, but initially invisible to authorities. Each disappearance occurs in different police jurisdictions: Seattle, Olympia, Ellensburg, Corvallis. Police departments don't share information efficiently. There are no centralized databases, no internet, no rapid communication between states. Each case is investigated as an isolated incident, but families are beginning to notice the similarities. The media is starting to connect the dots. By June 1974, 5 young women have disappeared without a trace. The university community is terrified. Parents are withdrawing their daughters from campus. Student residences are implementing curfews. Panic spreads. What authorities don't yet know is that the perpetrator is refining his technique with each attack. Ted Bundy isn't a reckless, impulsive killer. He's methodical, careful, and calculating. Each kidnapping is carefully planned. He studies his victims, learns their routines, and identifies moments of vulnerability. And he has developed a particularly effective method for gaining trust. July 14, 1974. Lake Sammamish State Park, near Seattle. It's a bright, hot Sunday. Thousands of people flock to the lake to escape the heat. Families with children, groups of friends, young couples. The atmosphere is joyful and carefree. In the crowd, a handsome young man moves with difficulty. He has one arm in a sling. He approaches a young woman sunbathing alone and smiles at her with a charming, slightly embarrassed smile. He explains that he's trying to carry his sailboat to his car, but can't do it with his injured arm. Could you help him? It'll only take a moment. The young woman looks at the man. He's handsome, well-dressed, obviously polite. His smile is warm, his body language non-threatening. His arm in a sling makes him look vulnerable, in need of help. And they're in a public park, crowded with people. What could possibly happen? Agree to help. They walk together toward the parking lot. They come up to a brown Volkswagen Beetle. The man opens the back door and points inside. He says the sailboat is back there. He just needs help lifting it. The woman leans over to look inside the vehicle. In that moment of distraction, the man attacks. He uses a blunt object, probably a metal bar hidden in his belt. He hits her on the head. The victim staggers, dazed. The man pushes her into the car, closes the door, walks around the vehicle, and gets behind the wheel. In a matter of seconds, he disappears from the parking lot. Her name is Janice Ott. She's 23 years old. She's never coming home. That same day, just 4 hours later, the man returns to Lake Sammamish Park. He is incredibly bold, almost suicidal in his daring. But Ted Bundy has discovered something about himself. Risk excites him. The more dangerous, the more intoxicating. This time he approaches another young woman. He uses exactly the same strategy, arm in a sling, requests for help with a sailboat, and a charming smile. The woman, 19-year-old Denise Naslund, also agrees to help. Multiple witnesses see these interactions. Some even hear the man introduce himself by name, Ted. A small but crucial detail that years later will help connect the crimes. Denise Naslund disappears the same way Janice Ott did. 2 women abducted in broad daylight, in a park full of families in a matter of hours. It's a level of audacity that terrifies investigators when they finally connect the events. 2 months later, in September 1974, a student foraging for mushrooms in a wooded area near Lake Sammamish Park makes a gruesome discovery. He finds human skeletal remains. Police excavate the area and find the remains of 4 different women, including Janice Ott and Denise Naslund. The bones are scattered, some gnawed by animals. But there is more disturbing evidence. Marks on the bones that indicate they were separated and moved post-mortem. It's a discovery that suggests something beyond simple murder. It suggests someone returning to the site, interacting with the bodies, having a continuing relationship with their victims even after death. While Ted Bundy commits these heinous crimes, he maintains a completely normal public life. It's the perfect duality, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in real life. During the day, Ted attends law school classes. He participates in discussions, writes essays, and studies for exams. His professors consider him intelligent, though not exceptional. Some notice that Ted seems distracted and that his academic performance has slipped, but they attribute this to normal student stress. Ted also continues his work at the Rape Crisis Center. He listens to victims of sexual assault, offers emotional support, and connects them with resources. He is patient, empathetic, and effective. His supervisors praise him. The victims thank him. No one suspects that the man comforting them is also a sexually violent predator. And there's his relationship with Elizabeth Klopfer. Liz, as Ted calls her, is completely in love with him. She sees him as her future husband, the potential father of her young daughter. Ted is affectionate with her, patient with the child. He takes the family on outings, invites them to dinner, and talks about future plans. But Elizabeth begins to notice inconsistencies. Ted disappears for long periods without explanation. He lies about where he's been. He keeps strange tools in his apartment: rope, duct tape, a crowbar. When Elizabeth asks, Ted offers plausible explanations. The tools are for car repairs. The absences are for field trips. Elizabeth wants to believe. She's in love. And Ted is very convincing. Fall of 1974. Ted Bundy moves from Seattle to Salt Lake City, Utah, to continue his law studies at the University of Utah. It's a new hunting ground, and Ted wastes no time. In October 1974, an 18-year-old student named Nancy Wilcox disappears in Holiday, Utah. A week later, 17-year-old Melissa Smith, the daughter of the local police chief, disappears after leaving a party. Her body is found 9 days later in the mountains. She had been beaten, raped, and strangled. An autopsy reveals that she had been held captive for several days before she died. More victims follow. 17-year-old Laura M. disappears after leaving a Halloween party. Her body is found weeks later in a canyon, in an advanced state of decomposition. Ted is refining not only his kidnapping technique, but also his post-capture behavior. He doesn't kill his victims immediately. He keeps them alive for hours, sometimes days. During this time, he indulges his violent fantasies, exerting absolute control over them. It's power that excites him, the ability to decide the life and death of another person. Investigators in Utah note the pattern of disappearances, but don't immediately connect it to the Washington cases. Communication between states remains poor. Each jurisdiction investigates independently. But there's one investigator in Seattle who's connecting the dots, Detective Robert Keppel. She's studying all the missing persons cases in the Northwest, looking for similarities and beginning to build a profile of the killer. November 8, 1974. A shopping mall in Murray, Utah. An 18-year-old girl named Carol Durant walks to her car after shopping. It's early evening. The parking lot is lit, and there are other people around. A man approaches her. He's handsome, well-dressed, and wearing a sports jacket. He shows her a badge and identifies himself as a police officer. He explains that there's been an attempted burglary of his vehicle in the parking lot. Could you accompany him to check if anything is missing? Carol, confused but obedient to authority, agrees. They walk to his car. Everything seems to be in order. The man then tells her she needs to accompany him to the police station to file a report. Carol, now more nervous, agrees to get into the man's Volkswagen Beetle. While driving, Carol notices they're not headed toward the police station. She questions the man, who answers vaguely. When she tries to open the door to leave, the man attacks her. He tries to put handcuffs on her wrists, but in his haste, he only manages to close one handcuff on one wrist. Carol struggles. She screams, she fights, she resists with all her might. The man tries to hit her with a metal bar, but Carol manages to dodge most of the blows. When the attacker is distracted, Carol opens the door of the moving vehicle and literally throws herself out of the car. She falls to the street and runs up. A passing car sees her, stops, and picks her up. Carol is hysterical, bleeding, with a handcuff dangling from her wrist. But she's alive. She's Ted Bundy's first victim to escape, and that escape will be her downfall. Carol Durant provides Utah police with crucial information. She describes her attacker in detail. White male, late 20s, approximately 5 feet tall, well-groomed brown hair, attractive, polite. He drove a brown or beige Volkswagen Beetle. The description is added to the suspect profile investigators are building. But most importantly, Carol can identify her attacker. She saw his face, spent time with him, and fought him off. If the police find the right man, Carol can identify him. November 1974. On the same night as the attack on Carol Durant, just a few hours later, another disappearance occurs. A 17-year-old student named Deborah Kent leaves a play at her high school in Bountiful, Utah. She goes to the parking lot to pick up her younger brother. She never returns. Witnesses report seeing a handsome young man lurking near the auditorium that night. A Volkswagen Beetle was seen parked in the area. A small key was found in the parking lot, near where Deborah was last seen. Years later, that key would be identified as belonging to a pair of handcuffs, the same handcuffs used on Carol Durant. Ted Bundy didn't stop after Carol escaped. He didn't panic. He didn't run away. Instead, he drove to another location and hunted again. It's a level of coldness, of emotional detachment, that's terrifying even for seasoned investigators. Deborah Kent becomes another statistic on the growing list of disappearances. Her body won't be found for years. Her family is devastated, caught in a limbo between hope and despair. For Ted, Deborah is simply another conquest, another demonstration of his power. The night of November 8, 1974, represents the perfect duality of his existence. Failure with Carol Durant, immediately offset by success with Deborah Kent. Victory snatched from the jaws of defeat. January 1975. Ted Bundy expands his hunting grounds to Colorado. It's unclear why he chooses this state specifically. Perhaps he feels Utah is becoming too hot. Perhaps he simply enjoys a variety. Or maybe, in his twisted mind, each new state is a new challenge, a new way to test his wits against the authorities. At Snowmass Village, a luxurious ski resort, a 23-year-old nurse named Karen Campbell disappears from a crowded hotel. She had dinner with her fiancé and his family. After dinner, she returned to her room to find a magazine. She never returned to the restaurant. A month later, her body was found on a dirt road several miles from a hotel. She had been beaten on the head with a blunt object, raped, and had her neck broken. The snow preserved some aspects of the crime scene, allowing forensic scientists to determine that she was alive for some time after the kidnapping. In March, 26-year-old Julie Cunningham disappears while walking to a tavern in Vail, Colorado. There are no witnesses, no physical evidence. She simply vanishes into thin air. Her body will never be found, although years later Ted will confess to killing her. In April, 25-year-old Denise Oliverson disappears while cycling in Grand Junction, Colorado. Her bike and sandals are found near a bridge. Her body is never recovered. 3 women in 3 months. Ted is at his peak, operating at an alarming rate. It's as if he can't stop, as if the compulsion is stronger than any instinct for self-preservation. By the summer of 1975, multiple police jurisdictions in 4 states were investigating the disappearances and murders of young women. The cases share disturbing similarities. Victims with the same physical profile, the same kidnapping tactics, the same brutal modus operandi. In Seattle, Detective Robert Keppel leads a task force that begins to consolidate information. They create a profile of the suspect based on witness accounts. White male, between 25 and 30 years old, handsome, well-educated, drives a Volkswagen Beetle, occasionally calls himself Ted, uses deception to approach victims, and can fake injury to invoke sympathy. Police hotlines are flooded with tips from the public. Thousands of men are reported as possible suspects. The names pile up in exponentially growing files. Among those names, mentioned in multiple independent calls, is Theodore Robert Bundy. One of the callers is Elizabeth Klopfer, Ted's girlfriend. Elizabeth has seen composite portraits of the suspect in newspapers. They resemble Ted. The Volkswagen Beetle is a match. The dates of the disappearances correspond to times when Ted was absent without explanation. Elizabeth finds a map of Colorado in his apartment with markings on locations where women have disappeared. Terrified, confused, desperate to be wrong, Elizabeth calls the Seattle police. She gives the name Ted Bundy. But her call is one of thousands. Ted's name is noted filed, but not immediately investigated. Another person who contacts the police is a former co-worker of Ted's at the crisis center. She also notes the similarities between Ted and the suspect's profile. She mentions that Ted collected material about violent murders and that he made strange comments about women. The name Ted Bundy now appears multiple times in police files, but there are thousands of other names as well. Investigators are overwhelmed, without sufficient resources to follow every lead. Ted, meanwhile, continues his normal life. He attends classes, hangs out with Elizabeth when she visits Seattle, and presents a facade of normalcy. But deep down, he knows time is running out. August 16, 1975. Granger, Utah, a suburb of Salt Lake City. It's past midnight. The streets are empty and quiet. A Utah State Police Patrol officer named Bob Hayward drives his vehicle through a quiet residential neighborhood. Hayward notices a Volkswagen Beetle driving slowly down the street. The vehicle suddenly accelerates upon seeing the patrol car. The behavior is suspicious. Hayward turns on his lights and attempts to stop the vehicle. The Beetle accelerates, then dips its headlights and attempts to evade. After a brief chase, the driver finally stops at a gas station. Hayward approaches the vehicle. The driver is a young, well-presented man dressed in dark clothing. He is nervous but tries to appear calm. He identifies himself as Theodore Robert Bundy, a law student at the University of Utah. Hayward asks why he fled. Ted offers a weak explanation. He got disoriented while driving, scared by the patrol car. Hayward isn't convinced. He requests a search of the vehicle's interior. Ted agrees, probably feeling he has no choice. What Hayward finds is disturbing. The front passenger seat has been removed. There's a metal bar, rope, handcuffs, duct tape, a ski mask, and an ice pick. There's no innocent explanation for this collection of objects. Ted tries to justify himself. He says the bar is for car repairs. He says he found the handcuffs in a dumpster. He says the other items are for miscellaneous projects. It's unconvincing. Hayward arrests Ted for evading a police officer and possession of burglary tools. Ted is taken to the station, processed, and released on bail. It seems like a minor arrest, but Hayward, following his instinct, reports the incident to detectives in Salt Lake City. He mentions the items found in the vehicle. The detectives, familiar with missing persons cases, recognize the pattern. Finally, after more than a year of killing, Ted Bundy is on the police's radar. Detectives in Utah begin investigating Theodore Robert Bundy. They check his background and discover that he previously lived in Seattle during the period of disappearances there. They find his name in the public tip files, mentioned multiple times as a possible suspect. They obtain a photograph of Ted from university records. They show the photo to Carol Duranch, the young woman who escaped in November 1974. Carol looks at the photo among an array of other photographs of similar men. After several minutes, she points to Ted's photo. "That's him," she says. "That's the man who attacked me." It's the breakthrough investigators needed. They now have an identified suspect connected to multiple jurisdictions, with an eyewitness who can link him to an attempted kidnapping. The detectives apply for a search warrant for Ted's apartment. The warrant is approved. In October 1975, the police raid Ted's apartment in Salt Lake City. What they find reinforces their suspicions. There are maps of Colorado, Washington, and Utah with markings on locations related to disappearances. There are newspaper clippings about the cases. There are ski guides areas where women have disappeared. It's not direct evidence of murder, but is evidence of an obsession with crimes. Investigators also take hair samples from Ted's Volkswagen Beetle. Fibers found on some of the recovered bodies are sent for comparative analysis. It's primitive forensic technology by modern standards, but it's the best available in 1975. Ted hires a lawyer. He denies any involvement in the crimes. He claims the identification of Carol Durant is erroneous, that he's never met her before. But circumstantial evidence continues to mount. February 1976. Ted Bundy is formally charged with the attempted kidnapping of Carol Durant. It is the first criminal charge against him related to his violent rampage. During the bail hearing, Ted represents himself, using his legal knowledge to argue for his release. He is articulate, persuasive, and seemingly confident. The judge, impressed by his ability but concerned by the seriousness of the charges, sets a high bail. Ted secures funding, primarily from his family and Elizabeth Klopfer, who still believes in his innocence. He is released while awaiting trial. Outside the courtroom, Ted speaks to reporters. He smiles to the cameras, declares his innocence, and acts as if it were all a terrible misunderstanding. He looks like any wrongfully accused college student, clean-cut, articulate, and engaging. But while cameras capture that image of innocence, families in multiple states continue searching for their missing daughters. Bodies continue to be discovered in forests and mountains. And investigators know, deep down, they have the right man. The trial is scheduled for June 1976. It will be the first time Theodore Robert Bundy will face justice. But Ted has other plans. Plans that involve manipulation, escape, and a continuation of his reign of terror that no one could have anticipated. The predator is cornered, but not yet defeated. Episode 3, Trial of the Century. June 1976. Salt Lake City, Utah. The courtroom is packed. Journalists, curious onlookers, victims' families, all squeeze into the wooden benches. Cameras aren't allowed inside, but outside, dozens of reporters hope to capture every moment of Theodore Robert Bundy's trial. It's an unprecedented media spectacle. The defendant is young, attractive, and educated. He doesn't look like a criminal. He doesn't look like a monster. In fact, Ted Bundy seems exactly like the kind of man a woman would bring home to meet her parents. Ted enters the courtroom wearing a dark suit, a conservative tie, and perfectly combed hair. He walks with confidence, almost arrogance. He greets his defense team with firm handshakes. He smiles briefly toward the gallery where his family is seated. Elizabeth Klopfer is there, tears in her eyes, clutching a handkerchief. The charge is attempted aggravated kidnapping of Carol Durant. It's the strongest case prosecutors have against Ted. Carol can identify him. The handcuffs found in Ted's Volkswagen match the handcuffs partially placed on Carol. There's physical evidence, eyewitness testimony, and a seemingly solid case. But Ted doesn't seem worried. He studied law, knows the system, and trusts his ability to manipulate perceptions. He genuinely believes he can talk his way out of this, that his charm and intelligence will prevail over the evidence. The judge assigned to the case is Stuart Hansen, a stern man with decades of experience. He's seen all kinds of criminals. But he'll later admit that Ted Bundy is different. There's something about his demeanor, a confidence that seems out of place for someone potentially facing decades in prison. Carol Durant takes a stand. She's 19 now, but she looks younger, vulnerable. The months since the attack have been torturous. Constant nightmares, paranoia, and inability to trust strangers. Simply walking into the courtroom takes monumental courage. The prosecutor carefully guides her through her testimony. Carol recounts the events of November 8, 1974. She describes a man who approached her, who identified himself as a police officer, who convinced her to get into his vehicle. Her voice trembles as she describes the attack, the struggle, her desperate escape. The prosecutor asks, "Is the man who attacked her present in this room?" Carol looks directly at Ted Bundy. Ted holds her gaze, unblinking, showing no emotion. Carol takes a deep breath. "Yes," she says, "that man, the accused." The moment is electric. The courtroom is completely silent. Everyone watches the interaction between victim and defendant. Ted doesn't look away, shows no guilt or shame, just a disconcerting calm. During cross-examination, Ted's lawyer attempts to discredit Carol's testimony. He points out that Carol initially hesitated before identifying Ted when she looked at photographs. He points out that months had passed between the attack and the identification. He points out that Carol was traumatized and confused, that memory can be unreliable. Carol stands her ground. She's confident. It's him, but the defense attorney has planted seeds of doubt. In a criminal court, reasonable doubt is all that's needed for a not guilty verdict. Prosecutors present physical evidence. The handcuffs found in Ted's Volkswagen are displayed. An expert testifies that the handcuffs are the same type, make, and model as those used on Carol Durant. The key found near where Deborah Kent disappeared matches these handcuffs. Hair fibers found in Ted's vehicle are compared to samples of Carol's hair. A forensic expert testifies that the fibers are consistent with Carol's hair, but he admits under cross-examination that he cannot say with absolute certainty that the fibers came from Carol. Forensic science in the mid-1970s was limited and imprecise. The defense argues that the handcuffs are common items, available at multiple stores, that the hair fibers could have come from anyone with similar hair, that all the evidence is circumstantial, not definitively proving Ted committed the crime. Ted observes everything intensely. He constantly takes notes and whispers suggestions to his lawyers. He occasionally smiles when the defense makes an effective point. He behaves more like a law student observing an interesting case than a defendant fighting for his freedom. The journalists in the courtroom notice this behavior. They write about it. Bundy seems to enjoy the trial, one reporter writes, as if it were an intellectual game rather than an existential struggle. Against his lawyer's advice, Ted insists on testifying in his own defense. It's a risky move. It opens the door for prosecutors to question him directly. But Ted is convinced he can persuade the judge. He relies on his charm, his intelligence, his ability to project sincerity. Ted takes the stand with confidence. Under cross-examination by his own defense, he recounts a story of innocent misunderstanding. He admits to being arrested with tools in his vehicle, but offers seemingly reasonable explanations. The handcuffs, he says, he found in a dumpster. The metal rod is for car repairs. The rope and duct tape are general supplies anyone could have. Regarding the identification of Carol Durant, Ted is adamant. I never saw that woman before the day she pointed me out in the lineup. I never attacked her. I never harmed her. It's a case of mistaken identity, plain and simple. Ted is articulate, calm, and convincing. He looks directly at the judge as he speaks. He shows no signs of nervousness. In fact, he seems to enjoy the attention. But then comes the prosecutor's cross-examination. And here, Ted's mask begins to crack slightly. The prosecutor presses for inconsistencies in Ted's story. Why did he run from Officer Hayward if he had nothing to hide? Why had the passenger seat been removed from the vehicle? Why did Ted have maps of Colorado marked with locations where women had disappeared? Ted becomes defensive. His answers become evasive. Small flashes of anger pierce his composure. The prosecutor has touched a nerve. For the first time, the judge and observer see something beneath Ted's facade. Something cold, something dark. June 30th, 1976. After days of testimony, closing arguments, and deliberation, Judge Hanson is ready to issue his verdict. Utah does not use juries for cases of this type. The judge is the sole arbiter of guilt or innocence. The courtroom is tense. Carol Durant sits with her family, holding her mother's hand. Elizabeth Klopfer is present, silently praying for Ted's exoneration. Ted's parents have flown in from Washington, sitting rigidly in their seats. Ted stands as the judge enters. His face is carefully neutral, but those near him notice that his hands are shaking slightly. Judge Hanson looks directly at Ted. He speaks in a firm, clear voice. Mr. Bundy, after carefully reviewing all the evidence presented, I find Ms. Durant's testimony credible and convincing. I find you guilty of the charge of attempted aggravated kidnapping. The courtroom erupts. Victims' families weep with relief. Journalists rush to the doors to report the verdict. Elizabeth Klopfer sobs uncontrollably. Ted stands motionless. His face has drained of color. For the first time in the entire trial, he seems genuinely surprised. He truly believed he would win. He believed his charm, his intelligence, his manipulative skills would be enough. Sentencing is scheduled for 30 days later. Ted faces between 1 and 15 years in prison. As he's escorted from the courtroom in handcuffs, he glances back once. His eyes meet Elizabeth's. She sees something there that terrifies her. Not sadness, not regret. Anger. Cold, calculating anger. The Carol Durange case is just the beginning. While Ted awaits sentencing in Utah, authorities in Colorado are building their own case against him. They have evidence linking Ted to the murder of Karen Campbell in Snowmass Village. A strand of hair found on Karen's body matches samples taken from Ted. Witnesses at the Wildwood Inn where Karen disappeared recall seeing a man matching Ted's description lurking in the lobby that night. Credit card records placed Ted in the Aspen area during the weekend of Karen's disappearance. In October 1976, before Ted is sentenced in the Utah case, Colorado authorities file first-degree murder charges against Theodore Robert Bundy for the death of Karen Campbell. Ted is extradited to Colorado. He is transferred from the Utah prison to the Garfield County Jail in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. It's a much smaller facility, less secure than state prisons. But Colorado authorities believe it's sufficient to hold a law student with no history of escape attempts. They deeply underestimate Theodore Bundy. Garfield County Jail, Glenwood Springs, Colorado. 1977. Ted Bundy is confined but not defeated. His mind is constantly working, evaluating, planning. Ted realizes something crucial. If he goes to trial in Colorado and is convicted of first-degree murder, he faces the death penalty. Colorado has capital punishment. Ted has no intention of dying in an electric chair. The only option is to escape. Ted observes the prison routine meticulously. He studies the guards, their schedules, their habits. He notices that security is lax. The guards are used to petty criminals, not sophisticated criminals. Ted is treated relatively well. Since he represents himself legally, he has access to a legal library inside the prison. He can spend hours there, supposedly researching his defense. The law library becomes the center of Ted's escape plan. He notices that a window in the library isn't properly secured. It's small, but Ted is slim and athletic. With enough effort, he could squeeze through. Ted begins to prepare himself physically. He exercises in his cell, losing weight to make the jump through the window easier. He collects money that visitors bring him, hiding it for use after the escape. He studies maps of the area and plans an escape route, and wait for the perfect moment. June 7, 1977. It's a routine day at the Garfield County Jail. Ted Bundy requests time in the law library. The guard, accustomed to this daily request, escorts Ted to the library, then leaves. Ted is alone. Ted works quickly. He approaches the window he's identified. He removes a frame, creating an opening just large enough for his body. Outside, there's a drop of approximately 9 meters to the ground below. It's a dangerous fall, but not impossible. Ted takes a deep breath. Then he pushes himself out the window. The fall is brutal. Ted lands awkwardly, twisting his ankle. The pain is intense, but he doesn't have time to stop. He gets up, limping, and starts running. He runs toward the mountains surrounding Glenwood Springs, deep into the forest. It's not until an hour later that the guards discover Ted is missing. The alarm sounds. Search teams are immediately dispatched. Sniffer dogs are brought in. Helicopters hover overhead. Ted, meanwhile, is hiding in the woods. His ankle is swollen, and he can barely walk. He has no supplies, no plan beyond escape. It's June, but the nights in the Colorado mountains are cold. Ted has no jacket, no food. For 6 days, Ted hides in the mountains. He drinks water from streams. He eats berries. He moves only at night. Search teams are constantly nearby. Helicopters fly overhead, but Ted remains hidden. However, without supplies and with an injured ankle, he can't sustain himself. Hunger and cold weaken him. Finally, desperate, Ted decides to take a risk. He descends from the mountains and attempts to steal a car in Aspen, but he's too weak, too slow. He's spotted and reported. June 13th, 1977. Ted Bundy is recaptured. The officers find him dehydrated, malnourished, exhausted. But even in defeat, Ted smiles. He's proven he can escape. He's proven he's smarter than his captors. And he's already planning the next attempt. After his recapture, Ted is transferred to the Pitkin County Jail in Aspen, a supposedly more secure facility. He is placed in solitary confinement under constant surveillance. The authorities are ashamed of the escape. They won't let it happen again. But Ted is patient. He observes. He plans. And he finds a new weakness in the system. His preliminary hearing is scheduled for December 1977. During these hearings, Ted is allowed in the courtroom without undue restrictions, legally representing himself. It's an opportunity, and Ted won't waste it. As the year 1977 draws to a close, Ted Bundy sits in a cell, staring out the small window at the snow-capped mountains of Colorado. He smiles to himself. The guards think they have him contained. They think there's no escape this time. They are wrong. Episode 4, Escape into Darkness. December 1977. Pitkin County Jail, Aspen, Colorado. Snow covers the surrounding mountains, transforming the landscape into a winter postcard. But inside the prison, Theodore Bundy doesn't contemplate beauty. He contemplates freedom. Ted has been watching, calculating, waiting. His preliminary hearing gives him regular access to courtroom. Since he represents himself, he can request time in the courthouse's legal library to prepare his defense. It's a concession the authorities grant, believing they're under control. Ted has noticed something crucial. The law library is on the second floor of the courthouse. There's a window, and below that window, there's a lower-level ceiling. And below that ceiling, there's a floor. About 6 meters of total descent. Painful, perhaps, but manageable. Ted has also been working out physically. He's lost approximately 30 pounds, reducing his body weight to facilitate quicker movement. He's been secretly exercising in his cell, push-ups, squats, stretching. At 31, Ted is in the best physical shape of his life. But the plan requires more than physical fitness. It requires appropriate clothing. Ted can't escape in the orange prison jumpsuit. He'd be visible for miles in the snow. He needs civilian clothes. And he has an ingenious solution. For weeks, Ted has been asking visitors to bring him books and legal documents. In these carefully hidden packages are pieces of clothing, a t-shirt here, a sweater there. The guards, accustomed to the constant flow of legal materials, don't thoroughly inspect each item. Ted accumulates a complete outfit, jeans, a sweater, a shirt, even a wool hat. He hides these clothes in the hollow of the mattress in his cell. He waits and plans the perfect moment. December 30th, 1977. It's the last day of hearings before the New Year's recess. The courthouse is less crowded than usual. Many employees have taken vacation time. The guards are relaxed, thinking about the upcoming celebrations. It's the perfect day. Ted is escorted to the courtroom in the morning. The hearing proceeds normally. Ted participates, asks questions, and behaves like the diligent law student he claims to be. During a recess, he requests time in the law library to review some precedents. The judge, unsuspecting, approves the request. Ted is taken to the second-floor library. The assigned guard escorts him, but doesn't remain in the room. It's standard procedure. Ted is left alone to work without distractions. The guard waits outside, occasionally peering through the window in the door. Ted sits at the table, opens legal books, and pretends to read. He waits. His heart is beating rapidly, but his face remains calm. He listens to the sounds of the building. Footsteps in the hallway, distant conversations, the hum of the heater. After about 15 minutes, the guard walks down the hallway, probably heading to the bathroom or to talk to a colleague. It's the moment Ted has been waiting for. Ted moves with rehearsed swiftness. He stands and walks to a supply closet in the corner of the library. He strips completely of his orange jumpsuit. Underneath, he's already wearing civilian clothes he's accumulated. Jeans, a t-shirt, a brown sweater. He pulls his wool hat over his hair. In less than 30 seconds, Ted Bundy the prisoner transforms into Ted Bundy the civilian. Ted walks to the window. His hands tremble slightly as he opens it. The cold December air hits his face. Outside, the world is surprisingly quiet. Snowflakes fall softly. The street below is empty. Ted looks down. The ceiling of the lower level is about 6 feet below the window. It's not a huge distance, but the roof is covered in snow and ice. He could slip, falling straight to the ground 20 feet below. He could break a leg, fracture a skull, but staying means the electric chair. And Ted has no intention of being electrocuted. He takes a deep breath. He pushes himself out the window. He lands on the lower roof with a thud. The impact resonates through his body, but he keeps his balance. He doesn't slip. For a second, Ted remains motionless, listening. Did anyone hear? Is anyone coming? Silence. Ted crawls to the edge of the roof. He lets himself fall, hanging by his arms, then lets go. He falls the last 3 meters to the ground. He lands in a snowbank, which cushions his fall. He rolls, gets up, and looks around. He's standing on a side street in Aspen. Historic buildings surround him. Tourists walk along the nearby Main Street, carrying skis, laughing. No one looks his way. To any casual observer, Ted is just another winter visitor. Ted walks toward Main Street. He doesn't run. Running would attract attention. Instead, he walks purposefully but unhurriedly, like someone who knows exactly where he's going. His boots crunch in the snow. His breath forms white clouds in the icy air. Inside the courthouse, the guard returns to the law library. He peers through the window in the door, expecting to see Ted Bundy working at the desk. But the library is empty. The guard enters, confused. He calls Ted's name. Silence. Then he sees the orange jumpsuit folded on the ground. The window is open. The guard runs to the window, looks out. Nothing. Just snow falling gently on Aspen. The alarm sounds. Ted walks through Aspen with a purpose. He studied city maps for months. He knows exactly where to go. He's headed toward a bus station on the outskirts of downtown. He keeps his head down, his hat covering most of his face. Aspen is a small town, but packed with tourists during the ski season. Thousands of visitors from all over the country come here for the New Year's holiday. Ted blends in perfectly. He's just another young man in casual winter clothes. He arrives at the bus station approximately 30 minutes after the escape. He buys a ticket with money he accumulated from visitors. The ticket clerk barely looks at him. Ted boards the bus to Glenwood Springs, the same town where he was originally imprisoned. It's a bold, counterintuitive move. The authorities would expect him to flee as far as possible. Instead, he heads straight for the area he should be avoiding. The bus departs. Ted sits by the window, watching Aspen disappear behind him. Other passengers chat about ski plans, restaurants they want to try, and the weather. No one suspects that the silent man in the wool hat is a fugitive serial killer. In Glenwood Springs, Ted transfers to another bus, this one bound for Denver. It's a trip of approximately 4 hours. During the ride, Ted remains silent, pretending to sleep, but his mind is active, planning his next steps. By the time authorities organize search parties, set up roadblocks, and alert every law enforcement agency in Colorado, Ted Bundy is already more than 160 kilometers away, mingling with thousands of holiday travelers in Denver. Denver, Colorado. Ted arrives in the city just as night falls on New Year's Day. The city is alive with celebration, fireworks, parties, crowds in the streets. It's the perfect camouflage. Ted needs money. The funds he brought back from his escape won't last long. He considers his options. Stealing is risky. He could be arrested for a lesser crime and admitted. Instead, he decides on something smarter, stealing. But stealing in a way that won't be immediately reported. Ted spends a night wandering the city, looking for cars with unlocked doors. It's surprisingly common. In the 1970s, many people trust each other, leaving their vehicles unlocked. Ted finds several cars, for which he steals small amounts of money, IDs, and credit cards. Not enough from each one for the owners to report immediately, but collectively, enough to keep them running. He also steals clothes from laundromats and public changing rooms. He needs multiple changes of clothes to avoid being recognized. With each small theft, Ted grows more confident. He's playing a game against the entire nation, and he's winning. On January 2nd, 1978, Ted boards an Amtrak train in Denver bound for Chicago. He uses a stolen ID to buy the ticket. The train is slow but safe. Police are monitoring airports and major bus terminals. Few people are thinking about trains. During the 2-day trip to Chicago, Ted stays in his cabin, avoiding conversation. He reads newspapers he finds, looking for mentions of his escape. The headlines are full of the story. Serial killer escapes in Colorado, Bundy fugitive, massive manhunt underway. His picture is on the front page. Ted smiles as he reads. He's enjoying the notoriety, the fact that the entire nation is looking for him. It's the ultimate game of cat and mouse. And Ted loves the game. January 4th, 1978. Ted arrives in Chicago. It's a massive city, easy to disappear into, but it's also January, and Chicago in the winter is brutally cold. Ted doesn't have any clothing suitable for this climate. He needs to move south. He considers his options. He could try to reach Mexico, cross the border, disappear into Latin America. But the border crossings will be guarded. His face is known now. It's too risky. Instead, Ted decides something that would seem illogical to any rational fugitive. He decides to go to Florida. It's not a decision based on strategic logic. It's a decision based on desire. Ted has been in prison for over a year. He's been deprived of his impulses, his need to hunt, to dominate, to kill. And Florida is full of colleges, young women, and potential victims. Ted can't resist the call. Using stolen credit cards, Ted buys a bus ticket to Atlanta, Georgia, with an eventual connection to Tallahassee, Florida. It's a multi-day trip, but Ted is patient. He's waited much longer for much less. At each stop, Ted changes his appearance slightly. He grows a beard. He changes his hairstyle. He wears different hats, different jackets. He's a master disguise, not through elaborate prosthetics, but through subtle changes that alter the overall perception. On January 8th, 1978, Theodore Bundy arrives in Tallahassee, Florida. It's a college town, home to Florida State University. Students are returning from winter break. The campus is bustling with young life. Ted breathes in the warm Florida air. He smiles. He's free. He's hungry. And Tallahassee has no idea what just arrived in the city. Ted needs a place to stay. Something cheap, anonymous, where no questions are asked. He finds a room in an apartment building near the university campus. It's a run-down place, inhabited mostly by students and transient workers. Perfect. He checks in using one of the stolen IDs. Chris Hagen, the owner, an elderly man barely looking up from his newspaper, accepts cash and hands over a key. No questions asked, no background check. This was common in the 1970s. Ted's room is small, sparsely furnished, a bed, a table, a chair. But it has a window that overlooks a street near Florida State University. Ted can constantly see students passing by. Young, attractive, carefree women. They walk alone, especially at night, without a thought of danger. Ted spends the first few days establishing a routine. He steals a bicycle to get around the city. He visits the campus, familiarizing himself with the layout. He identifies the dorms, the paths students take at night, and the poorly lit areas. He also continues to steal to survive. He breaks into houses and apartments when the occupants are away. He steals televisions, radios, anything he can sell quickly for cash. He's efficient, careful, and leaves no evidence. On the outside, Ted is just another young man in a college town. No one gives him a second glance. The Florida police have no idea that Theodore Bundy, one of America's most wanted fugitives, is living in plain sight in Tallahassee. But Ted can't stay asleep for long. His urges, repressed for months in prison, are growing. With each passing day, the compulsion grows stronger. He watches the young women with increasing intensity. He fantasizes, plans, imagines. It's only a matter of time before he acts. January 15th, 1978. Barely a week after arriving in Tallahassee, Ted is already on the prowl. He's identified a target. the Chi Omega sorority house on the Florida State University campus. It's a 2-story building that houses 39 young women. Ted has watched the house for days. He's noticed that the back door is frequently unlocked. Students are constantly coming and going, and in the rush and distraction of college life, they often forget to lock the door. It is negligence that will cost lives. On the night of January 14th, late in the morning, almost at dawn on the 15th, Ted approaches the Chi Omega house. He's wearing dark clothing, gloves, and a makeshift mask. He's also carrying a weapon, a piece of oak wood about 30 centimeters long, which he's shaped into a club. He tries the back door. It's unlocked. Ted gets in. The interior of the house is dark and quiet. Most of the residents are asleep. Some have gone out to parties or other late-night events. Ted moves through the hallway with quiet steps, gently opening doors and peering into rooms. He finds his first victim, 21-year-old Margaret Bowman. She's sleeping in her bed, alone in her room. Ted quietly enters. He approaches the bed and attacks. He hits Margaret on the head with the club. The blow is brutal, crushing her skull. She dies almost instantly, with no chance to scream or defend herself. Ted then strangles her with a nylon stocking to ensure death. He is quick, efficient, ruthless. But he's not satisfied. It's not enough. Ted moves to the next room. There he finds 20-year-old Lisa Levy, also sleeping. Ted attacks again, savagely beating her with the club. Lisa awakens during the attack and tries to defend herself, but is disoriented and weak from the blows. Ted repeatedly hits her, then strangles her. But with Lisa, Ted doesn't stop there. His long-repressed sexual urges explode. He sexually assaults Lisa as she lies dying. He savagely bites her body, leaving distinct teeth marks on her buttocks and nipple. It's a level of sadism that goes beyond his previous crimes. Lisa Levy would die from her injuries in the hospital hours later. Ted continues his rampage. He enters another room, where he finds Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler, roommates who share the room. He attacks both of them, repeatedly hitting them with the club. The blows fracture skulls, break jaws, and cause massive brain damage. But something interrupts. One of the victims screams. Or maybe Ted hears a noise in the hallway. He panics. He runs out of the room, down the stairs, and out the back door. The entire attack lasts less than 15 minutes. In that short period, Ted has killed 2 women and seriously injured 2 others. It is the most violent and uncontrolled attack of his career as a serial killer. Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler will survive, but will be left with permanent physical and psychological scars. Both will require multiple reconstructive surgeries. Ivis, their lives will never be the same. Ted doesn't stop after Chi Omega. That same night, just blocks away, he enters another apartment shared by students. There he finds 21-year-old Cheryl Thomas sleeping in his bed. Ted attacks her with the same club. He hits Cheryl repeatedly on the head. The blows fracture her skull in 5 places. Cheryl survives, but she will be permanently deaf in one ear and suffer lifelong balance and coordination problems. Ted eventually flees the scene. He returns to his apartment, wipes the blood off his clothes, and hides a garrote. Then he goes to bed as if nothing had happened. As the sun rises over Tallahassee on January 15th, 1978, the city awakens to a nightmare. The Chi Omega house is cordoned off. Ambulances fill the street. Reporters begin to gather. The news spreads quickly. A mass attack at a college dorm. Multiple victims. 2 dead. Panic grips the campus. Students call their parents, crying. Many leave the university immediately, too terrified to stay. Fraternities implement security systems. Police patrol the campus constantly, but the attacker remains unknown. Ted Bundy, living just miles away, watches the chaos he created with dark satisfaction. The Chi Omega murders mark a turning point in the Ted Bundy saga. For the first time, his crimes are no longer carefully planned and spaced out. They are frenetic, uncontrolled, the result of impulses he can no longer contain. Investigators work feverishly to find a perpetrator. They collect evidence. The bite marks on Lisa Levy's body, which will prove crucial later. Clothing fibers. Survivors' testimonies. Descriptions of a dark, figure seen fleeing the house. But they still haven't connected the attacks to Theodore Bundy. His photo has been distributed nationally, but in Florida, where he's never operated before, local officials aren't familiar with his face. And Ted has changed his appearance enough to make casual recognition difficult. Ted knows he's living on borrowed time. Every day he's free increases his chances of being recognized. But he can't stop. The compulsion is too strong. And 3 weeks after the Chi Omega murders, Ted Bundy will commit his final crime. A crime so despicable, so unforgivable, that even those who found something fascinating in his intelligence or charm will turn completely against him. The predator is reaching its end. But first, it will claim one last innocent victim.